In the winter of 1889, in a quiet hunting lodge deep within the forests outside Vienna, a terrible discovery was made. Behind a locked door lay the body of a young crown prince. Beside him was the body of a teenage baroness. The prince was the only son of the Emperor of Austria-Hungary, the heir to one of the most powerful dynasties in Europe. His name was Crown Prince Rudolf of Austria. He was only 30 years old. At first, the news that reached Vienna was strangely calm. The crown prince, it was said, had died suddenly of illness. But the official story soon began to change. Within hours, whispers spread across the capital. Something far more troubling had happened at the lodge called Mayerling. Had the crown prince taken his own life? Had it been a desperate act of forbidden love? Or had the truth been quietly hidden behind the walls of the imperial court? More than a century later, the mystery of Mayerling still lingers in the shadows of European history. To understand what happened in that lonely hunting lodge, we must first understand the life of the prince himself. Rudolf was born in Vienna in 1858, the only son of Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth. From the moment of his birth, his future had already been decided. One day, he would inherit the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a vast realm stretching across Central Europe. Millions of people would one day look to him as their ruler. Yet the childhood of a crown prince was far from gentle. Rudolf's father believed that a future emperor must be hardened through discipline. Military tutors were placed in charge of the boy's education. Their methods were severe. The young prince was awakened by gunshots fired beside his bed. He was forced to march long distances through forests in the cold. Sometimes he was left alone in the wilderness to conquer fear. For a sensitive child, the experience was deeply frightening. Eventually, even the emperor realized the training had gone too far. The tutor responsible was dismissed. Rudolf's education was placed in the hands of more progressive teachers. Under their guidance, the young prince began to flourish. He developed a love of science, literature, and politics. He read widely. He asked questions. And he began to imagine a different future for the empire he would one day rule. But within his own family, Rudolf often felt alone. His relationship with his father was distant and formal. Emperor Franz Joseph valued duty above all else. Emotion was rarely shown. Conversations between father and son often felt more like meetings between ruler and subject. Rudolf longed for understanding, but the emperor expected obedience. His mother, Empress Elizabeth of Austria, known across Europe as Sisi, was very different. She disliked the rigid life of the imperial court. She traveled constantly, seeking freedom far from Vienna. Rudolf admired her deeply, yet her absence meant he rarely saw her. Caught between a distant father and an absent mother, the crown prince grew into a thoughtful but restless young man. Inside the glittering halls of the imperial palace, surrounded by ceremony and expectation, he often felt profoundly alone. As he matured, Rudolf developed political ideas very different from those of his father. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was vast and fragile. Many nations lived within its borders: Hungarians, Czechs, Croats, Italians, and others. Rudolf believed the empire must change if it hoped to survive in the modern world. He supported reform, greater freedoms, a more modern government. But Emperor Franz Joseph believed stability and tradition must come first. Father and son saw the future in very different ways, and the Crown Prince increasingly felt that his voice carried little weight. In 1881, Rudolf married Princess Stephanie of Belgium. The marriage had been arranged for political reasons. It was meant to strengthen alliances between royal houses. But the union soon proved unhappy. The two were very different people. Stephanie was reserved, traditional, and comfortable within the rigid structure of the court. Rudolf was restless, intellectual, and drawn toward modern ideas. Their personalities clashed. Within only a few years, their relationship had grown distant and cold. The prince began withdrawing from court life. He drank heavily. Friends noticed dark moods and moments of deep melancholy. Some later believed he suffered from depression. Others believed the pressures of royal life had simply become unbearable. It was during this troubled time that Rudolf met a young woman who would forever become part of his story. Her name was Baroness Mary Vetsera. Mary was just 17 when she encountered the Crown Prince. She was young, romantic, and fascinated by the mysterious heir to the throne. Rudolf quickly became captivated by her admiration. For the prince, Mary offered something he rarely found within the imperial court: warmth, sympathy, devotion. Their relationship soon became intense. The two met in secret. Within the glittering society of Vienna's aristocracy, whispers of the affair began to circulate, yet the full truth remained hidden. Years later, historians discovered farewell letters Mary had written to her family. In them, she spoke calmly of death. She asked forgiveness, and she declared that she could not live without Rudolf. These letters have led many historians to believe the two lovers may have spoken of ending their lives together. In late January of 1889, Rudolf traveled to Mayerling, a hunting lodge in the Vienna woods. Such visits were not unusual. Members of the imperial family often used the estate as a retreat from the rigid life of Vienna. Mary Vetsera soon joined him there. Her arrival was arranged quietly. Some servants at the lodge were aware that the Crown Prince had a guest, but few knew who she was. On the evening of January 29th, the two spent several hours together inside the lodge. Dinner was served. Nothing seemed unusual. Yet sometime during the night, something changed. The next morning, servants noticed that the Crown Prince had not appeared. Repeated attempts to wake him brought no response. The door to his room was locked. Finally, the door was forced open. Inside, they found a shocking scene. Crown Prince Rudolf lay dead. Mary Vetsera lay beside him on the bed. Both had died during the night. The official explanation eventually announced that Rudolf had shot Mary before turning the weapon on himself. But from the very beginning, the story raised troubling questions. Why had the imperial court first claimed the prince had died of illness? Why were details of the investigation kept secret? Why were witnesses instructed to remain silent? The unanswered questions only deepened the mystery. Rudolf's death changed the course of history. Without him, the line of succession shifted. The next heir to the Habsburg throne became his cousin, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Nearly 30 years later, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand would ignite the First World War. In this way, the tragedy at Mayerling quietly altered the future of Europe. For Rudolf's mother, the loss was devastating. Empress Elizabeth of Austria never truly recovered from the death of her son. She withdrew even further from the life of the imperial court. She traveled constantly, wandering across Europe. Many said she was trying to escape her grief. From that time forward, she dressed almost entirely in black. The brilliant and restless empress became a quieter, darker figure. Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria reacted differently. He rarely spoke openly about his emotions. Instead, he returned to his work. Day after day, he continued the duties of empire. But those close to him knew the loss had deeply wounded him. The future he had prepared for his son had vanished overnight, and with it, the certainty of the dynasty's future. Today, the quiet lodge at Mayerling still stands in the Austrian countryside. Visitors walk its grounds searching for answers, but the mystery remains. Was it a tragic pact of love, a prince overwhelmed by despair, or a secret buried by the powerful forces of empire? History has never given us a final answer. But the story of Crown Prince Rudolf of Austria remains one of the most haunting royal mysteries of the 19th century. And like many mysteries of the past, the truth may still lie hidden in the shadows of history.